Hello, everyone. Thank you again for joining this Criterion Edge webinar. For those of you that are not already aware, Criterion Edge is a distinguished global provider in the medical device industry dedicated to helping clients advance compliance and enhance market success through expert regulatory, scientific, and clinical writing services. Our webinar today is entitled Trending Topics from the AI Act to Orphan Devices, Key Takeaways from RAPS EU Convergence 2024, presented by our founder and president, Lori Mitchell. Lori Mitchell, founder and president of Criterion Edge, excels in addressing regulatory and writing challenges in the pharmaceutical, IVD, and medical device sectors. With decades of clinical and regulatory experience, coupled with practical, solutions-driven mindset, she has positioned Criterion Edge as a leading provider of regulatory and scientific writing services, helping healthcare companies provide vital drugs, biologics, and devices to those who need them. Under her leadership and guided by the specific project needs, Criterion Edge provides clients with dedicated teams of experienced writers, scientists, regulatory specialists, librarians, and project managers who collaborate with and work alongside the client's internal teams. Holding a Master's of Nursing from UCLA, Lori brings a unique blend of clinical insight and regulatory knowledge that drives Criterion Edge's commitment to quality and client success in complex clinical and regulatory landscapes. Now I'm going to hand it off to Lori to proceed with today's webinar.
Well, hi, everyone. Here we are, and I'm so sorry to have kept you waiting. We were having some fairly significant technical issues that we were chasing, as you can well imagine. Thank you so much for coming and being patient. This is an inaugural session of our new Trending Topics webinar series. And the intent of this series is to focus on presenting and creating a forum for key trending topics, late-breaking regulatory news, and other hot-button issues from medical and in vitro device industry leaders. So we're focusing on device here. Our questions today will not revolve around pharma or biologics. We'll be thinking mostly about devices today. So, let's tap into some of those critical conversations that I think we've all been hearing. Now that the conference season is upon us, we've been visiting colleagues at different conferences, and we're hearing lots of conversations, questions, trends, concerns. And that gave me the idea to start this new webinar series. So I hope you like it. I hope it's can be as interactive as possible. One thing that I want to say as a caveat for all of you, and I apologize also for this. I looked at a lot of your your registration questions, and many of them were very specific to regulatory requirements and guidelines. And I do not have a background as a regulatory affairs professional. So unfortunately, I'm not the right person to answer or even opine on some of those very technical regulatory questions that some of you asked. You wouldn't even want me to opine on them. What I can do and what I can open up to the audience is just the idea that these questions happen and what's on your minds. But to look to me to answer some of those questions or give my opinion might be not the right move for me to do that. So we're going to talk about lots of different things today. So let's get started for the next slide. Thank you. So the agenda today is, and the questions or topics we're going to discuss, which was part of the of your when you saw when you signed on, is let's talk about the AI Act and MDR, and really IVDR as well. But MDR, it seems to be rotating around MDR right now. There are challenges, incompatibilities, and conflicts that arise from applying both the regulatory frameworks, which means the AI Act and the MDR in our submissions and how we construct our documents. So let's talk a little bit about that and some topics that I've heard notified bodies and comments notified bodies have made about this. Innovative and orphan devices. This is also another hot button topic that I've heard in my travels to different conferences. And I was able to, at RAPS EU, especially, and most of these come from RAPS EU 2024 in Berlin. But there was an expert panel that suggests developing MDR special conformity pathways to support the unique regulatory challenges faced by these types of devices. So let's dig down a little bit more into their comments and see what you think. Now, notified bodies acknowledge challenges, and boy, do they have some. And if notified bodies have challenges, so do we, is the way I put it. From inconsistent opinions across notified bodies, which I know we've all lived through, to the delays in the Unimed launch, notified bodies continue to face challenges from all directions in this current regulatory landscape. What can be done? Where are we? And then this last one, which I thought was a very interesting concern that some notified bodies brought up in their presentations, the impact of massive procrastination, and those are their words, of MDR and IVDR dossier submissions. Notified bodies are concerned at the potential constraints to future device availability as applications have declined, which is code for they're worried that this is all going to hit at the last minute and there will be massive delays and folks won't have their certifications. They'll let them lapse. So let's get started. Next slide. Fundamental paradigm shift. Those are quotes. That was a quote directly from someone at a panel. The AI Act and EU MDR. Now, for purposes of ease of talking, I'm going to reference MDR, but obviously the AI Act has just as much impact on our friends in the IVD space. So just take it that it's both in MDR and IVDR, the impacts that we're talking about. So the AI Act, I'm sure I don't need to tell all of you about this, but it takes a risk-based approach to the assignment of risk, ranging from unacceptable risk all the way down to very minimal risk. AI systems identified as high risk under the Act include AI technology used in safety components of products, which by definition then includes all medical devices. So that's something to think about. And in other words, we can shortcut that to if your medical device has any deploys any artificial intelligence in its software or any other way, it's a high-risk device. Notified bodies face increased burdens and the need for specialized expertise, so they are feeling the crunch as well to bolster their number by folks that have expertise in the AI Act. Manufacturer challenges include implementing widespread updates across their organization, touching almost every aspect of internal documentation, including the massive quality systems, risk management documents, tech files, everything. So this is a fundamental paradigm shift of massive proportions, the implementation of the AI Act. Next slide. So the EU has led the way with the AI regulations. And I ran across, I don't know if any of you others have heard this term, the Brussels effect. The Brussels effect, as it was explained to me, is that the EU is the first in the world globally to put together a massive AI Act at this scale, even close to this scale. So the Brussels effect is meant to imply that the EU wanted to start driving the conversation about AI worldwide, globally. Not the US and not China or in Asia Pac or anywhere like that. The EU wanted to be the first out of the gate. And that's apparently called the Brussels effect, to begin to force the conversation and force the regulations. So the next thing is separate but equal. This was a comment from a manufacturer who said, we'll have to make it work because we will not be able to separate them being the AI Act and EU MDR anymore. They are inexplicably linked. And I use the term at the top of the slide. That's also a quote. They're like conjoined twins. They can't be separated. So if you look at the graphic, the AI Act overlaps EU MDR, and that would be the same for EU IVDR. But in the middle, and in that overlap, is the understanding of what exists in the middle. And I denoted that with questions because I know you all have questions. We all have questions. Is it understanding the ramifications, the direction that you need to take, the impact of where these two massive regulations overlap and how they interact with each other. So some of the things that the regulators brought up in some of the meetings at RAPS-EU was conflicting terminology, different language. One entity uses a term, the other entity act is referring to the same thing, but calls it something different. It's even things like that are so simple that folks are still trying to tease through. So this is the understanding, the overlap is where most of the conversations seem to be lying right now, and the frustration about how do we integrate these two twins. Next slide. So this is just a quick overview, and we're going to move on to the next topic in a minute. Can you go back? Yeah, thank you. Notified body. So the key concerns for manufacturers is notified body availability and competence to conduct AI conformity assessments. That's an important one. Their competence to conduct AI conformity assessments. How's that going to work? And how's that going to turn out? And how will it delay things? We're just not sure yet. And, you know, I just want to linger here for a minute. Criterion Edge is a specialized focused service provider of regulatory, scientific, medical writing services. We also do regulatory consulting, but it is not our primary focus. We are the gas in your engine when it comes to getting things written and documents created. But in doing so, our writers, our teams have deep understanding of these regulatory requirements, but only as they really relate to what goes on the written page. So we're not strategists per se. We can advise regulatory strategists about, well, that strategy is going to look this way in a written document. So are you sure you want to do it like that? We can bridge that gap, but what we steer away from is providing direct advice on regulatory strategies. So I think this is where a lot of you folks will be trying to struggle with your clients or your employers, which is how do you merge AI with the particular regulations that dictate the geography that you're working in and want to submit in. So these delays arising from these regulatory overlaps are real. I know you're already feeling them. We're feeling them on behalf of our clients. We've started projects that have to go on hold because our clients are huddling internally trying to figure things out. And they want to get it right. So as to try to mitigate downstream delays back and forth with questions from regulatory authorities and notified bodies. So that leads us to the next and the last point, which is these are burdensome requirements. They are as yet still unclear as they relate to documentation and implementation across the board. So if you're feeling that, you're not alone. Next slide. Oh, this is so Justin, are you on? Are you able to come live? Because I don't know how to tell people what to do with this whole question. There
Is
we are. Thank you. So, Justin, why don't you I don't want to speak out of turn. What do you want folks to do? Ah, people are responding.
Indeed, they
Excellent.
are. So we'll give everybody maybe 20 to 30 seconds to submit their response, and we'll go ahead and share some of the results here shortly. Lori, I'll let you go ahead and do that whenever you're ready.
All right, thank you. So, Justin, you will end the poll when it looks like everyone has responded.
I will indeed.
True? Okay, very good. Alrighty, well, it looks like everybody there's still a little bit of adjusting.
We'll give it 5, 4,
All right.
3, 2. Anyone else?
No pressure, anyone. There we go. Well, the winner is winner chicken dinner is I occasionally use company AI tools as part of my job. That seems to make a lot of sense. I'm a little surprised that I never use company provided AI tools, and maybe that the key to that is it's company provided AI tools. It's either because of your role, I would imagine, or your company, that your role responsibilities or your company that you don't interface with AI tools very much. 13% use them every day. And then almost 20%, their company doesn't have any AI tools. Could be, independent contractors that really haven't used AI tools yet. I know I'll just going to stop here for a minute about AI and writing. I just got back from DIA. Some of you may have gone to that. You can't walk down an aisle without AI, how it can help your writing services, or it can help this or help that, or whatever. People who are developing AI-driven solutions. So we certainly at Criterion Edge are looking into that, probably not to create our own solution, but looking at solutions that are being offered in the industry that helps us augment, not replace, the very talented writers that we have on our team. I'm just going to editorialize another few seconds by saying that we believe that there is a role to play for AI. It exists in our life already. But what we don't believe is that entire documents, that the technology is at a place yet in its development, that it can 100% replace writers with thinking brains that talk to their clients and understand the data and can make those kinds of decisions. But yes, we do believe there is a role for AI in the writing process, but not to replace human interactions. So thank you for that. I think, Justin, maybe you can shut down there. Or can I shut it down? Looks like I can.
It is
there
officially ended.
Okay. Next slide then. So the next is we're going to talk about innovative and orphan devices. And at RAPCU and in other places, other conferences, expert panels have been convened that suggest developing, for example, special conformity pathwords under MDR, and this will certainly catch up to the in vitro device companies as well, to support the unique regulatory challenges faced by these devices. So that is one of the first things we can talk about. We have found in the orphan devices and orphan drugs, actually, I think orphan drugs, that concept has been around a little bit longer than orphan devices, but now here we are, where we have been submitting, helping our clients submit dossiers, all kinds of other types of documents on orphan devices. So that is a relatively new concept. that there's no other device like it. So how do you build, for example, a CER? What data do you use? Who are your competitors? What's the competitive or therapeutic landscape? All of those questions come up with these innovative and orphan devices. So they do require special conformity pathways, and the notified body representatives that I heard talking acknowledge that the way we did it before, even 2 or 3 years ago, does not meet the needs of these kinds of devices. It doesn't meet the needs of the conformance to the regulations because it doesn't match the unique challenges of these devices. So notified bodies and other stakeholders are talking about this and creating about the need to create these special conformity pathways. So the only thing I guess I can say to all of us is, stay tuned, because that's happening. Another thing I would say, again, for many of you as regulatory affairs professionals on this call, I would say push your notified bodies, push your regulatory partners, and ask for these conformity pathways. Ask those questions. Don't just take it on face value that you were using old mismatch of conformity pathways for these unique devices. I would say open up conversations with your regulatory bodies and notified bodies to chart the course. Data sufficiency, I already alluded to. The main issue in getting these products to market is there's no data on them. There's very little. There's a dearth of data. These are orphan devices, often have, as we all know, a very low end number of patients that meet the indication for the device. So the ensuring sufficient clinical data to support the authorization is definitely a challenge. Regulatory officials promote a quick win approach. They want to get things done as quickly as possible to drive these needed devices to market. And the conversations I've heard is, let's just try to solve the problem as quickly as possible to get these new and innovative devices to the market and safely, and then sort out the details after we get started. But safe and conforming, and then maybe we can start polishing the process and the pathways up as we go along. So that's an interesting concept as well. I included a quote at the bottom that talks about that I hear some complaints from manufacturers. This is from a competent authority, that it's unpredictable and too costly. And if you ask that it being, the regulatory pathways and driving a device to market, that the notified bodies' responses are unpredictable, their solutions may be too costly. And if you ask the same question of 5 notified bodies, you get 7, 8 different answers. So that's where we are with in this rapidly changing landscape. Next slide. So just as a summary, I thought I would just summarize it here to a pragmatic approach to innovative orphan devices, notified body perspectives. One is, so these 3 on the left are a summation of what we've already talked about, scoring some quick wins. Panel of experts identified the need for developing specific and clearly defined conformity assessments pathways. We've talked about that. More clarity is needed. And this is a quote: "It's critical to first gain more clarity on product and technical dossier guidance, rather than focusing on how the regulatory framework should work." And that was a quote, I believe, I didn't reference it. I believe that's from a notified body member. In other words, let's not fuss about how things should work. Let's just get clarity on our guidances and make it work, is what I took from that comment. And then notified body decisions, turning it back to the notified bodies, lacking consistency. What is needed are very clear requirements and a consistent way of implementing those requirements. We're all in this together where this is a work in progress. And you probably have already read this quote from Mr. Von Hahn from TÜV Süd discussing data sufficiency challenges. And what stands out to me, the quick fix, which is what I highlighted there. That's my highlight, not his. And notice what it says, that do as a kind of quick fix to get these innovative devices off the table. Their notified bodies are concerned that there's a backlog because they don't have clear guidance or they haven't figured out yet how to drive these innovative and orphan devices to market. And so there's a backlog of them. And I don't know if any of you are involved in the orphan device or any kind of innovative device market, but you may be experiencing that. And we already know the backlog is long anyway for more routine devices. Imagine what this could mean for innovative devices. And what does the backlog really mean at the end of the day, other than the company can't sell it and the device and make money, is that device is not available to the patients that need it. That's the bottom line here, is that if companies are driving these to market and yet they can't get to market because they're stalled at the approval stage from regulatory authorities, then patients are going without. Next slide. So stakeholders seek clear guidance and a sense of urgency from regulatory authorities, a sense of urgency to address issues now, drive creative solutions, take a pragmatic approach to the longer term solutions. And regulators should focus on, again, these quick fixes to clear the backlog and move innovative orphan devices to market. These seem to be the overarching themes of this topic. Next slide. So notified bodies now are turning the lens inward in this slide that we're going to talk about now, this section, by acknowledging their own challenges and the downstream effect on their clients, manufacturers. So notified bodies, this was, I think, taken from a panel of notified bodies and a mix of other professionals. And notified bodies are clearly acknowledging their need for improvement, citing the multiple causative factors, which are multiple, that they're now poised to move forward on. So the notified bodies are feeling like the things are coming into focus and they know what they need to do, and now they're trying to get it done. One of the key things that they mentioned in the particular forum that I was listening to is the move towards digitalization. Notified bodies are all struggling with rewriting and updating their conformity assessment procedures as a result of the AI Act, of orphan devices and so forth. And so there's a lot of update. There's a big upheaval internally for them to update their procedures and pathways. And one thing that these panels have noted, these notified body panels have noted in some of these conferences, is we've got a lot of internal work to do. We've got to retool how we do things in order so that we're not the problem. We already know we're a bottleneck, but I think there's improvements, they think that improvements can be made. So it might be great to talk to your notified bodies to ask them, what are they doing internally to solve these problems? If you're a client of a notified body, ask them what's happening and what you can expect, because I know that they are working on it. And this last one is really interesting. Have these regulatory challenges precipitated a form of regulatory Darwinism? That is That is a quote from a question that came up with that. And what that really means is, now let's turn it back to the manufacturers. If the manufacturers are waiting to the last minute because they're not clear on what's going on, and they have now boxed themselves into a bit of a corner, a bit of a jam, because they've waited too long and they're trying to push something, a submission across the finish line late in the game. And maybe it's not well conceived. The regulatory strategies are not well delineated. And what happens? The process is delayed. The submission is delayed. It's sitting on someone's desk at a notified body. And those companies begin to have to take their devices off the market because they waited too long. So are they waiting too long? Is it because they're confused? Is it because they think it's going to be easier than it is? Whatever the reason, that's what this questioner was meant by regulatory Darwinism. In other words, the dying out of devices through regulatory pressures. And so that's an interesting way to put it. I know we all know about that, but I've never heard it put quite like that. Next slide. So what are the next steps here? So with regards, this again is a summary slide. A notified body official says, we now understand more fully what works well and what doesn't work well and where we need to make improvements. Digitizing the regulations. There's a quote again from another official. We need to have a really clear set of requirements and a consistent way of implementing them. And the regulatory Darwinism, which is medical devices are being culled from the marketplace by manufacturers waiting too long to recertify. And there's a quote there that about have regulators considered that manufacturers haven't gotten their products recertified under MDR, despite having at least 5 years to come into compliance, as simply victims of regulatory Darwinism. And that was a question posed by a member of an audience to a regulatory authority or a notified body official, I'm not sure which. But that's what, and there was a long answer about it, but the answer was basically, I understand, yeah, that could be. That's what we're seeing. There may be lots of devices on the market that don't need to be there. Next slide. This is our last learning objective. And this is this massive procrastination phenomenon that the notified bodies have raised the alarm about. And the alarm is the right word. Notified bodies have seen a significant reduction in the number of IVDR and MDR applications that are coming in, which may signal manufacturers are delaying. Why are they doing that? Why are applications so low, especially for IVDs? And the reason I say especially for IVDs is they crunched some numbers, and the applications for in vitro devices have dropped precipitously. Medical devices is much lower, but IVD applications have dropped off the planet. So we can draw some, reasonable inferences to why that is. They just got a big delay for IVDR. Maybe they're trying to come inward and figure out how to approach their submissions and use the delay wisely like that. So, but notified bodies are saying, look, it's not because there's no notified body capacity. There was, I don't remember what the percentage was, but notified bodies are claiming that they have no backlog issues anymore. That they have hired, there should be plenty of reviewers and support with your notified bodies to not have them be the cause of delays. So they're pointing back to the manufacturers saying, We don't think it's us. We think it might be out in the marketplace that these delays are happening. And then, of course, they're raising the alarm. They and others are raising the alarm about the market consequences of these last-minute application submissions. And the question always is, will patients lose access to needed devices? Next slide. So is trouble on the way? In other words, if notified body capacity is no longer the issue, yet applications have dropped, so what's going on? And the notified bodies are beginning to sound the alarm. Will access to devices, and that's the key point at the bottom left there, will access to devices nosedive as a result? And that's what the notified bodies are, running up the flag about. And telling the manufacturers, you just can't delay. You've got to get them out there. All right, next question, or next slide. And then this is a recap of what we just talked about. Back to that. There we go. Warning bells are going off. I think that was a slide of our next poll question, but Justin, I don't know if you're ready for the next poll question or the final poll question.
I'm ready when you
are. Sure, go right ahead. I can't see the top of, there it is. Do you agree with their concerns regarding potential impact of device availability? So love to hear your thoughts on this. Yes, no, I'm not sure.
Give it another minute for responses. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Any last takers?
There we go. So we've got just over 50% of people, expressing concern, outright concern. And it's almost an even split between I have no concerns to I'm not sure. So some healthy skepticism there, or some folks that might be sitting in a really good spot. So that's enviable. So thanks very much. Let's go on to the next slide. I think that is the end of our slides. So Justin, if you've got any questions from the audience, either that we can cover, let's use our last few minutes just to cover a few ad hoc questions.
Absolutely. So we'll move to our Q&A portion of the presentation. There were a few questions that did come in during registration and throughout today's presentation, so we'll do our best to get to as many of those as we can. As a reminder, for any that we are not able to get to, we will follow up with you via email after the presentation. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with our first one. What is the definition of orphan device actually? Why must it be regulated?
Well, so I'm glad I made that caveat at the very beginning about me being able to quote chapter and verse regulatory requirements, definitions, and provisions. And I can tell you what, from our perspective as writers and having written orphan device CERs and others, I can tell you what an orphan device is as it relates to those reports, is that there is, and I alluded to this earlier, these are unique devices that essentially have very specific functionality and very specific indications for use, and thus may not have any competitors whatsoever. And that's really the crux of the orphan word in the orphan device. They have no parent. They might not even have any siblings or cousins out there. And so who or what do you compare them to when you're establishing, safety and performance in the state-of-the-art landscape? Who are their competitors? What are the alternatives? So that's the result of what an orphan device is when you're writing about it. But I'm sorry that I can't quote or put up on the screen exactly how an orphan device is defined. Why must it be regulated? Because it's a device that goes in patients and alters a patient's, anatomy, landscape. It's used on them in some way and makes diagnostic decisions possibly, or participates in them. And so they absolutely must be regulated because they have effects that need to be understood. Next question.
Alrighty. Considering the similar device / equivalent data will be very challenging for orphan devices. If so, can we proceed with the non-clinical data?
Oh, now that's an interesting question. Again, looking at our experience, we've been in this situation before, writing, regulatory documents, primarily CERs, because this is where it sort of all gets down to, which is how are you going to defend it in your MDR or submission, or your ongoing submission updates, is how can you leverage alternative forms of data in orphan drugs or devices where there are few, if any, direct competitors that you can leverage their data for to help with your own, to set that landscape. So non-clinical data can be very tricky, and it's not a yes/no question. It's like, no, you can't, or yes, you can. It's definitely not a yes, you can. Don't worry about it, yes, you can. Because non-clinical data isn't clinical data. Can you leverage it in very specific ways that might support some or of the indications of the device? Possibly. And that would be in conjunction with deep and detailed conversations with your notified body to see if they would even accept that. But those conversations would have to be very specific, and the use of non-clinical data would have to be limited only, even if it's agreed upon, only to the uses that you've decided together. Next one.
Right, on to the next. How does the AI Act and MDR align with FDA?
Well, let's get back to that Brussels effect. I'll take the AI Act. That was sort of one of the kind of the big deal about that. The EU came out first globally, beating, the big dog in the room, which is the FDA. And the FDA is behind on this. They're working on our own set of regulations here in the US. But so we don't know yet how the AI Act aligns with FDA, because the FDA doesn't have a specific act like the AI Act. So that Brussels effect was really meant, the EU was really strategically getting out in front of the conversation to help define it. So the regulations for AI in the US, as we all know, those regulations exist, but they're not compiled into one act, one document, where that document is, or that is very broad and has very, very specific intent. Where the US is decentralized in its language about AI, the EU has come out with centralized language. And the MDR, of course, is very similar in that, again, the EU said, we want to put devices in our market this way. We want this kind of data. We want it compiled this way. The notified bodies are, really kind of help serve the competent authorities in the EU that are almost act like member states. So this was, again, the MDR was meant to provide an overarching framework for all members of the European Union.
Lovely.
That might be, I think we might be at the end of our time together. And I'm really, really sorry about that because I know we started so late. Do you have let's not go to any more questions because I don't think we've got any time.
No worries. So that's going to wrap up today's presentation. Thank you, everyone, for joining and your patience at the beginning. As a friendly reminder, by attending this webinar, you are eligible for a free consult that can be reserved the next 10 business days to discuss either a current or upcoming project you may have. If you wish to do so, feel free to pick a day and time that works best for you using the link in the chat, or you can email your availability to consult@criterionedge.com, and we'll be happy to get something on the calendar. As a reminder that those links can be found in the chat itself. So feel free to peruse at your convenience and let us know if there's anything else we can help with. We'll stay on for another minute or so if there's any last minute questions. If not, have yourself a wonderful rest of your Wednesday.